Hey YouTube, it's JP Dillon. Welcome to part 2 of the service on the Pioneer CT-F1250. The customer wants to go ahead with the services on the transport. But in order to do that, we're going to have to completely remove the transport from the machine, which is going to require a bit of disassembly. In order to access the transport, we need to completely remove the front panel, knobs, button covers, etc. and then unplug the transport, unsolder some signal wires, and dismount the transport from the chassis. So let's get to it. So first we have to start by removing all the knobs. They just pull off on here. There's no Allen keys, thankfully. Some of them are going to fight you a little bit. I think we can squeeze the bias through here as well as the pitch control. Now we need to relieve the top screws here and also the screws on the bottom that hold faceplate in. So I'm going to take those out and then we'll take off the faceplate. Also remember that when you take off the bottom screws, there are two transport screws, one here and one here, that have to be removed in order to dismount the transport from the chassis. So now that we have those screws out, we should be able to very carefully take the faceplate loose like this. We can see that it completely separates and we can set it aside. Then we need to dismount the rest of the transport. And in order to do that, there are more screws up on the side here, down there, and likewise on the other side there. So those all need to come out. And then as far as detaching it, there's the transport control, which is here, and I believe there's two more transport controls and some signal wires that go down in here. It's been a couple of years since I worked on one of these, but as we find them, I'll show you. And before you go pulling the transport out, one thing you want to do that will save yourself a lot of headache in the future is to remove this plastic tape retainer. These clips are notorious for breaking, and when they do, it's a hassle to get this thing back in here. So very carefully, you want to bend these to the side. It could be one or the other. In fact, you can see someone has already made an epoxy repair there previously, as it was probably removed and it was bumped. There's also little tiny plastic fractures here, so we may need to do some mending on those. In fact, one thing I commonly do is I'll get a soldering iron, a very sharp tip, and we'll just very carefully fuse that little bit together. Just kind of touch it there just to fuse the crack. Just like that. Same with the other side here that's obviously been messed up. This is a common point of failure, so people not knowing will pull this out and they'll break it. So you can see I fused the crack there and that one over there. So hopefully I can get this out of here. I'm going to need both hands, but I can get this out of here and then we can start removing the transport. So I was able to successfully remove it without damaging the plastic any further. That's a very common point that breaks, is the bits that hold this in here. And just memorize how the spring goes. This hook goes into that hole up there, and the other part holds the cassette into place as you put it in there. So that's at least the tough part, and we've got all of our screws out, so it's just a matter of getting this loose. So we're going to go ahead and unplug our transport control. Let me set this down a little bit here. I know I'm a little bit shaky. This camera does not have any fancy anti-vibration on it, so you're kind of going to see every little movement I make. And then somewhere down here, I think this is the one for the control panel. I don't think that this comes out with it. We do have to undo the little pitch control LED, noting that the green is on top here. And let's see what else. Like I said, it's been a while. Push it back, lift it up, and we'll probably see. Okay, so the control lines do pass through it, so I will have to take that loose. Thankfully that just unplugs here. That gets routed through the hole. Yep, they put it right through the hole there. Alright, momentary pause here while I get both hands steady so that I can get this out of here without damaging it. So when you get the transport free enough, then you see that you have to unsolder the signal wires. And there's playback and record and oscillator. That's these guys right here. Yes, focus on my hairy hand. No, how about you focus there? Anyways, you have to mark those. They may vary slightly as far as their color and orientation, so check your machine before taking it out. This is the primary concern down here at the bottom. Let's shed some light on that. Yeah, right there. Focus. Yeah, so those have to come out. And then there's a secondary line back here. Right, those two guys need to get desoldered, and then you can take them out. That's your playback. The rest of it's for your recording, your oscillator. So you have to take those loose, cut the zip ties, and then we should be able to take this whole thing out. Another sign that your deck has been serviced is these are soldered in. These originally would have been wire wrapped, so that you would have needed a wire wrap tool to undo them, but most people just gently uncoil them and pull them off and then solder them back later. You can do that, and I will be doing that, but make sure you have a very hot iron. You want at least a 40-watt iron, if not more. I'm using a 55-watt iron, so that you don't transfer too much heat to the board and crystallize the solder underneath those pins, which will mean you'll have to resolder them again. Same can be said of the ones down here, so you really need to pay attention to that because that's a very important fact. Now on my deck that I'm servicing here, the right channel is black and white and the left channel is green and white, but they may differ on your machines. So don't go by my colors, look and see what you have first. Same with the record stuff. Like this cable is red and white, and then black and white, and then just pure white for the oscillator, but that may differ. So pay attention to that. So once you get everything unsoldered, then you have the freedom to remove the transport. And that's what we're going to focus on next, is this guy. Now, we are going to take care of the previous workmanship that was done on the power supply, where you can kind of see a little bit of questionable workmanship there and some bad soldering, but especially that right there, that's kind of ugly. But that's after we get the transport working. The main priority is transport. We need to take care of the take-up clutch problem and the idler wheel, replace the pinch rollers, the belts, pretty much get it in nice working order. So for that, we're going to have to remove the chassis so that we have a lot more working room. So the way that I typically start with these is you want to gain access to the back of the transport and the flywheels. So in order to do that, what you really have to do is take loose this top board. This is the control board for the direct drive motor. You have to take loose this solenoid, which isn't accessible until you get to the two screws, which are underneath that board, and take that loose. And then we'll also need to take this plate off so that we can address the clutch, the belt, and take the motor apart to be serviced. So it's a little bit of a involved repair for sure. And then getting to the pinch rollers and stuff like that's a lot easier. And the idler wheel up front is just a matter of removing this spring here, taking this plate off and accessing that via the control pin there. So not a big deal. And I think that idler wheel, the one that they got in there, might be a little bit too skinny for what it is. It's supposed to be a little bit larger than that. But yeah, we'll get to that when we get to it. Right now we just need to get to the flywheels. So let's take that top board off and loosen the solenoid. So we've got 3 screws up top. We've got one here, here, and here. Let's remove them and take this loose. So once you take the 3 screws out and cut all the zip ties holding the wire looms, this is where you're at, which gives you access to the screws that hold the solenoid in. And note that there isn't a 4th one here. I don't think there was a 4th one. Now, if we look here really close, we see this little springy thing here. And you're wondering, what does that do? Well, what it does is it unifies the ground between the motor and the spindle. As you can see there, it's hooked around that, and it attaches there. If you lose that part, you will get an obnoxious static noise every time the tape moves. So yeah, don't do that. So next, we're going to loosen up the solenoid, get it free of the plunger, and then we should be able to pull the flywheel backing plate off. Now once you get the solenoid loose, it's going to come off like this. You're going to pull it away from the plunger. And then if we put this up on its front, we can see that the plunger is still attached to the trigger mechanism down here. So we want to wiggle and pull up on this until it comes free of that. See, there's that little fork there. That's what that fits into. So just make sure that that doesn't get lost. And you can desolder your solenoid if you want to. I've got plenty of slack here, so I'm not worried about it going anywhere. This would also be a good time to alleviate the return spring for the head lift mechanism, and it just pulls right out of there. In fact, let's see. We can just remove this with the tweezers. A little bit of glue there. Yeah. Try not to stretch the spring out too much. I'm not sure how the guy changed the belts last time, if he didn't get this plate off and didn't remove this, because this is still the factory glue. So maybe he just like fished the belt in there? I don't know. Well, anyways, that's the return spring. Don't stretch it out, don't mess it up. And now we should be able to take out these screws here and remove the backing plate. Just as a side note, you want to remove this screw here for this terminal strip and this screw here for this terminal strip. That'll give you a little bit more freedom of movement just before you take the backing plate off. Alright, and now that you have all the perimeter screws moved and those two terminal strips loosened up, you should just be able to lift this up and take this off. And that exposes our direct drive capstan and our supplementary capstan, which is kind of loose here. That belt is just, yeah, look how loose that belt is. So, in order to change that, what you have to do is remove the screws and the thrust bearing, take this plate off, and then we can change the belt out. Someone has chewed that screw up really bad, so I guess they were in here somehow. But yeah, that's kind of ugly. I don't like seeing that stuff. And then we do need to pull these out and lubricate them. They just come out. As soon as we loosen the direct drive motor and pull that back, we should be able to get to the capstan and pull that loose and lubricate those parts. So first thing, let's get a proper screwdriver bit, and hopefully the heads aren't too badly chewed and we can get them out without replacing those screws. And then get the belt off and get the capstans out so that we can oil them. Alright, so after removing those two screws, you can take that top portion off. They weren't too chewed up. I didn't mess with the thrust bearing adjustment or anything, but now you can get to this awful little belt and this capstan shaft. And there's a little fiber washer down there I don't want to lose. And here is the old belt, which is, that's been replaced, but it's definitely stretched out and seen better days, so we're replacing that. We'll add a little bit of lubrication to the capstan shaft too. So there's your supply capstan bearing, which is basically just for back tension. It helps lower wow and flutter a bit. We're going to set that off to the side. And then we need to remove the direct drive coil board, which is these three screws here, and pull this up. So let's do that. Yeah, unfortunately that head's pretty badly chewed up. So I had to use some diagonal cutters to get it loose. That one's stuck, so give me a moment while I break those loose and then we'll get this apart. Alright, so with the screws out, I should be able to carefully lift and remove the coil board up and away. Don't break the Hall effect sensors if you can manage it. There's that nice beautiful direct drive there. That's a good 8-pole motor. And then we can pull this up. Now as I'm doing this, there's no fiber washer there. There should be. there are plastic washers on the other underside which have likely fallen, and we need to retain those because they help the capstan stay in place in the thrust bearings. So that's important. And then the next thing we'll need to do is take loose this board, which is going to require, I believe, that this part come out, because I can't get to that screw without releasing this backing plate. So that's a little fun. And you see here are the little plastic doohickeys which go on the capstans. I'm just going to stick them on there to keep them there, just so I don't lose them. It just helps with keeping the capstan from wandering, so that's a good thing. As far as getting that additional backing plate off, I'm trying to remember here since it's been so dang long. I don't remember if I just take off the Hall effect wheel and there's screws underneath that, or if that holds the entire plate assembly in place, but I think that's a good place to start. Yeah, so those 3 screws, just remove the trigger wheel and then remove this from the capstan bearing assembly, and then that gives us full access to the motor board here, which is really important if we need to service the motor. And let's see here, that's your tape motion sensor right there. Shouldn't there be a belt around that, or is that entirely done by the front? I forget. Anyways, we'll find out soon enough. But that screw there, the one back there, that one there, and I think there's another one up top, they all need to come loose so that we can take the real motor assembly up. Alright, so I got the 3 screws out here, and now we need to take loose this motor board. Oh, there's one more I missed up here. Oopsie. And I think also this one here next to the solenoid needs to come out too. So these top 2 I missed. Hold on. Okay, now I think I have them all. And let's just get this up and away here. Hold on a second. And there is our intermediate assembly with the real tables. Oh yeah, okay, so the tape motion is driven by that front belt there. I thought it was from the back, and I was freaking out, like, why isn't there a belt there? Here's the one that I took off when we were doing the torque experiments, and we can see that that's not really a round belt anymore. It's got a flat spot in it, and it's also kind of degrading and turning into powder, so that's getting changed out. There's our idler wheel. That's going to need to be replaced. This motor does work, but we're going to service it anyways just because it's a high failure rate thing. So 2 screws to get this out, and then I'm going to have to desolder the motor from the run board so we have a little more freedom with it, and then we'll go over in the next video about restoring the motor. And this is a fairly common failure. These 047 motors like to get little open spots. This one hasn't died yet, so we're going to do some preventative maintenance. Also, while you've got this apart, it's a good idea to make sure, and it's probably hard to see, I don't think these ones have the failure, but around the hub here, the plastic will split and these will stick. They will not retract like these ones are doing. So these are still in good shape, but sometimes that plastic will get a crack in it and they won't retract, and then you got to do some fancy work in order to fix that problem. But what we're going to focus on right now is just extracting the motor, desoldering it from its points, and that way we can get to servicing that in the next video. So getting the motor out is easy. It's just a matter of removing 2 screws, and then you just trace the blue and red leads up to there, but it's been removed before. So I wonder what we're going to find out when we open that motor up. If somebody's already serviced it, or if they just took the motor out to service the transport. But in any case, I'm going to go ahead and desolder those leads, and we're going to stop at this point right now. But yeah, we have this. This is how much you have to take this apart in order to service every aspect of it. You also might want to get that little 8-volt, 30 milliampere grain of wheat lamp there while you're at it. That's up to you. Not hard to change. Talk to Joseph Mirabella, which is Project BLK86 on eBay, or I believe Peace, Love, and Music also has those. Or Dave Wojnarowski, also known as Dwojo, or Dwojo69 at MSN.com. I forget. It's been a while. Anyways, that's going to be all for this episode. Stay tuned for part 3, where we dissect the real motor, take it apart, and see what needs to be done with it. But until then, thanks for watching. More stuff to come.